Good evening, and welcome to the West Hartford Public Schools Board of Education board meeting for Tuesday, January 15th. We will begin this meeting with a roll call, but after the roll call, I am going to ask for a moment of silence just to honor our community. Our community has endured a number of sad events over the past few weeks, and I think it's only timely to just take a pause, take this all in, and just have a moment of silence. So what I'll do is just ask Cammie to go ahead and do the roll call, and when the roll call is complete, we'll take that time.
Mrs. Blanks?
Here.
Dr. Greenberg?
Here.
Mr. Levine?
Here.
Mr. Paul-Uke?
Here.
Ms. Poland?
Here.
Dr. Thomas Farquharson?
Here.
Mr. Zdanowitz?
Here.
Student Representative Gus Bacon?
Here.
Megan Striff-Cave?
Here.
Thank you, everyone. We will proceed with the next item on the agenda, which is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do have one minor revision to the agenda this evening, and that is our student reports will follow our superintendent reports. At this time, I would like to just read or give a brief statement regarding our rethinking school start times. Back on November 20th, 2018, the Board of Education tabled the vote regarding rethinking school start times. This vote still remains tabled and will continue to remain tabled until a budget is adopted by this school board in April. After the budget is adopted, the board will then have discussions on next steps. I want to say thank you to all of those who continue to express your concern on this important issue. Right now, we will move right into our student participation, which is from the King Philip Middle School. We'll ask them to come up. It is the French Escargot adoption project, and I'm very excited to have you all here with us. It's always a treat when we can receive any of the activities that our students display, and we look forward for you to come before us each and every time. So this is a home away from home, so just feel relaxed. There's no need to be nervous, and just be yourselves and do your thing.
I'd invite up Megan Zengel, our world language supervisor for the district.
The other thing I just want to state is any parents who want to come up and get some photos of your children, feel free to come up. There is a better view from where we are sitting, so we don't mind. And don't be shy.
Thank you, Superintendent Moore and members of the board. We're very excited to be here tonight to present an incredible activity that our French 1A students at King Philip and at Bristow have been involved in this year. During our summer curriculum writing this past summer, teachers were looking for creative ways to engage students in the language and encourage them to use their emerging French. So the teachers stumbled across the Adopt an Escargot project, and we had no idea what to expect, but they were willing to try it. What has come about is a year-long activity that our 6th grade students, many of whom are studying French for the first time, have become willing and able to communicate in the language about their lives and the lives of their new friends, their escargot. So I'm going to let them introduce their escargot to you. Representing King Philip Middle School, we have teacher Shoshana Lazuski and students Cam Levine, Audrey Alerte, Donovan Knoll, Benjamin DeBella, Amiti Nair, Valerie Reyes Castillo, Georgia Caldwell, Dory Ohad, and Amaya Camilleri. And from Bristow, we have teacher Dawn Minogue and students Geneva Swanson and Fiona Power. Come on up.
Something on here? Nope. Okay. Thank you so much for having us. We're actually going to turn it over to the students who have prepared a great presentation for you to talk about what we are doing in the classroom that will continue as they go through the course of French at both King Philip and Bristow. Press the button. Go ahead, Cam.
Good evening. My name is Cameron Levine. I have come to share with you our Escargot project. I will now read for you off which we took in order to adopt an escargot. I, Cameron, swear to take full responsibility for the escargot named Johnny, to provide him with safe housing, adequate clothing, and educational opportunities. I further pledge to participate in class activities and keep in regular contact with Le Grand Escargot, so that Johnny may stay connected with his culture and heritage. I also swear to never spill salt or eat shrimp, lobster, or crab in the presence of my escargot. We will now tell you about our escargots.
Good evening. My name is Audrey. We use our escargots in our French class to learn French in a fun, interactive way. We created our own baby escargot books, all in French, highlighting our baby escargots' adventures, such as their Halloween masquerade party and introducing their best friend. We also designed and created our escargots' houses and closets.
Good evening. My name is Donovan. We regularly email Le Grand Escargot in French about our escargot's favorite foods, clothes, and adventures. Le Grand Escargot responds in French to each of our emails. This project makes us more excited to learn and use French because we're responsible for raising, caring, and educating our escargot.
Bonsoir. Je m'appelle Bende. Mon escargot s'appelle Escargot. Son anniversaire est le 7 septembre. Il aime les hot dogs et il aime faire du ski. Il n'aime pas Martha Stewart qui travaille dans la cuisine. Il a peur de montagne. Il préfère turquoise et bleu. Il est d'Escargotville. Il a 7 ans et sa saison favorite est l'été. Oscar est un escargot grand, créatif et amusant.
Elle s'appelle Delphine. Son anniversaire est le 10 juin. Elle adore la bibliothèque et air cultivé. Elle n'aime pas juste de orange. Elle a peur de télévisions. Ses couleurs préférées sont bleu, vert, rose et orange. Sa saison favorite est le printemps. Delphine est une escargot intelligente, gentille et calme.
Bonsoir, je m'appelle Valerie. Mon escargot s'appelle Lily. Son anniversaire, c'est le 5 septembre. Elle aime chanter très fort. Elle n'aime pas les bonbons. Elle préfère rose. Elle est 11 ans. Elle préfère la pizza. Aussi, elle préfère les printemps. Lily est un escargot positif, rapide et différent.
Elle s'appelle Océan. Son anniversaire est 2 octobre.
Elle aime le fruit et le vacher et le basket et les fleurs roses et rouges. Elle déteste le marde. Elle est peur des chiens, le chat et l'océan. Ses couleurs préférées sont orange et bleu. Son nourriture favorite est le fraise. Sa saison favorite est le printemps. Son sport favori est le ski et le basket. Océan est un escargot sympa, gentil et impressionnant.
Bonsoir, je m'appelle Amithi. Elle s'appelle Georgia. Son anniversaire est le 5 septembre. Elle aime chanter quand il pleut. Elle n'aime pas les pâtes. Elle a peur de requins. Elle préfère bleu, vert, rose et jaune. Elle préfère la pizza. Elle préfère le printemps et elle préfère le football. Georgia est un escargot amusant, gentil et attentif.
Thank you so much.
I don't know if this is a word. Fantastico.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. Wonderful presentation. Let's give them another round of applause, please.
All right, I need that.
The next item on our agenda is our public communications, and we have 5 individuals signed up. So the first on the speakers list is Stephanie. You make your way to the mic, please. And just to go over some of the ground rules, you have 3 minutes to speak, that's per individual, and then we have 21 minutes per subject matter. And Cammie will raise 2 cards, a yellow card when you're at the 1 minute mark, is that correct? 2 minute mark, and the red card when you've exhausted your time, okay? And if you can have a wrap-up statement, but if you go a little long, I'm just here to remind you of the rules.
So I should talk really, really fast then. My name is Stephanie Rauch, and I live at 68 Elmfield Street in West Hartford. I'm here today to talk about the change in incoming class size at Bristow. When I heard about the grade size change at Bristow in December, I thought that it was still a proposal, and I waited to hear more information, any information. But in January, the lottery information was posted without comment, reflecting a reduced incoming grade size of 105. I'm struggling to understand why this change is being forced through this coming year with no opportunity for feedback from parents, students, or teachers. The district's multi-year enrollment projection shows that while the enrollment for the next 6 years is scheduled to go down by about 179 students, next year it's actually projected to increase very slightly. If next year's enrollment is basically staying the same, what is the rush to cut students in the current upcoming year? That 179 students reflects an 8% drop in the total enrollment in the middle school level, but Bristow is being forced to cut 25% of its current population within the next 3 years. Over that same 3 years, the overall enrollment is projected to drop 132 students, leaving Bristow, the smallest school, to absorb 79.5% of the decline. Bristow offers a unique opportunity for students in our district. For some students, a smaller school is just a better choice, and small schools have been shown to improve the learning environment. But if small is good, smaller is not necessarily better. Meanwhile, at Sedgwick, the largest school, already at its maximum space capacity according to the report, they will see an increase in population to over 900 for every year in the next 6 years, reflecting an average overall increase of 5% over their population today. The overall decline in enrollment could be seen as a benefit to all 3 schools, keeping Bristow at its current size, which has proven to work well and attract students from across the entire district, while giving Sedgwick and KP an actual chance to breathe and still maintain their larger overall schools. At Bristow, a 25% cut in the students and accompanying staff could be detrimental to both the structure and community of the school. A critical mass for both students and staff is vitally important in order to have a rich and full educational experience. Beyond academics, without a critical mass, participation in clubs, band, orchestra, theater could deteriorate, making Bristow a less attractive place for future students who already have less chance to get in because the number of slots has been reduced. This vicious cycle could contribute to a downward spiral for the school. This year, my 7th grader decided that he wanted to audition for the school play, which was a bit surprising to me because he'd never really mentioned that he was interested in participating in theater. So I asked him why he wanted to do that. And he said, "You know, Mom, I want a challenge. It's kind of intimidating to think about being in a play, and I want to challenge myself. I want to go outside my comfort zone." This week I asked him, if you'd gone to Sedgwick, do you think you would have tried out for the play? And he said, "No way. I never would have tried out at Sedgwick." In his case, the smaller school, but viable in size, gave him the courage and the confidence to branch out from the known. In a smaller population, KP and Sedgwick could have a positive impact on their student body as well, giving them more opportunities to learn. I urge you to reconsider the grade size change at Bristow for the upcoming year and beyond, to seek feedback from parents, students, and teachers, and to consider how declining middle school enrollment could actually benefit us all. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker up is Christopher. And what I did fail to say is the board members do not respond to your comments.
My name is Christopher Rauch. I live at 68 Elmfield Street. When I was in 5th grade, I was faced with a tough decision of deciding which middle school to go to. I was hoping for a low number in the Bristol lottery so that I had that choice, and I got one. I had endless conversations with my mom, talking about all the possible factors that go into choosing a middle school. When the day came to pick, I was ready. I knew I wanted to go to Bristow. Now, as a 7th grader, I could not be happier with that choice. Bristow is an excellent option for 5th graders who are choosing their middle school. It's a smaller school, and you get to know everyone, which helps bring together the community. The changing class size will not help this welcoming environment. In fact, it will have a very negative impact. First of all, this will disrupt the environment of Bristow. Now, you may think that it will also disrupt the environment of KP or Sedgwick if you cut teachers there, but it will have a bigger impact on Bristow because of the smaller overall population. The teachers who are cut will have to fill the roles of those not being cut, which can lead to stress, less effective teaching, and ultimately they might want to make them leave the school. Also, in order to have an effective learning environment, you need enough teachers to fill those welcoming roles. If you cut from any school, they'll be very sad over the loss of a teacher. But this change not only affects Bristow, it also affects Sedgwick and KP. If we push those people who are not going to Bristow into Sedgwick and KP, Sedgwick in particular could go over capacity by a significant amount. Clearly, this doesn't only involve Bristow. Secondly, if we cut the amount of students coming into Bristow, the participation in clubs or activities will obviously go down. If there's not enough interest in band, choir, theater, or even after-school clubs, they could be canceled. And with less things to do, students will be less engaged in school, and less interest in the school could lead to less enrollment. If not enough people enroll in Bristow, the school could eventually close. The smaller school size could also have other consequences. It could lead to less enrollment in Bristow by another way, because people don't want to go to a school if none of their friends are going to go. It would make people less happy and could cause a harder transition from elementary school to middle school. In conclusion, this change will have an overall negative impact on the WHPS middle schools. It will do more harm than good, and should this decision be overturned, it will definitely benefit the WHPS system. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Christopher. Next up is Mary.
Good evening. My name is Mary Fleischle, and I live at 28 Brunswick Avenue in West Hartford. I'm here to advocate for later start times for high schoolers. As a statistician, I think about the average kid, but I also realize there's always variation around that average. Now, the average teen has trouble getting to sleep before 11, and needs 9 hours of sleep. And this is why the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends high schools start no earlier than 8:30. Many parents have testified here that they enforce early bedtimes, and their kids have no trouble with the current schedule. Assuming their kids are able to fall asleep at these early bedtimes, it's likely they're lucky, and they have kids whose circadian rhythms are just more on the early bird side of the distribution than the night owl side. So the existence of these kids who have no trouble getting up at 6 a.m., it doesn't disprove the studies that show the typical teen has trouble getting up that early. I'm also here to talk to you about 2 recent studies that have found that later start times are more likely to benefit kids whose parents have less money. In one study, the researchers examined kids in Seattle, which moved to later start times. The researchers found after the change, kids got more sleep, attendance rates and grades improved. In particular, tardiness and absences were reduced at the high school in the district that was more economically disadvantaged, had more economically disadvantaged students, and not at the other high school. Another study, which examined start times in North Carolina, found that disadvantaged students had higher grades if their schools started later. This finding does not surprise me. I have a job with a flexible start time, and I will confess that I drive my high schoolers to school almost every morning to enable them another 15 minutes of sleep rather than taking the bus. My husband and I are even considering buying my son a car so that he can drive himself and my daughter to school. And I'm considering advocating for my son to have first period free in his senior year when he's stressed for college so he can also sleep in. All of these things I couldn't do if I didn't have the money or time to advocate. Additionally, if my kids had depression or anxiety from sleep deprivation, I could afford therapy for the kids. And if my kids were unable to keep up with the material at school due to their sleepiness, I could afford a tutor. Many kids in West Hartford are not as lucky as my kids to have all of these numerous safety nets. These kids are the ones who would benefit most from later start times. So in addition to helping the typical teen get more sleep and improving their mental and physical health, I also want to consider later start times as a way to help close the achievement gap for kids who are on free and reduced lunch. I know it's budget season, and so your thoughts are very focused on costs. Think about this as an intervention, which is estimated to cost around $90,000, which is $1.50 a resident of West Hartford. I think that's a good deal compared to what additional instructional time, additional social workers, or tutors might cost. Thank you.
Next up is Heather. What's that last name? Okay, Heather, are you here? All right, so we'll move to, is it Gerald or, okay, Gerald, make your way up.
My name is Gerald Rocktashel, and I live at 545 South Main Street. Thank you for the board for the opportunity to speak. I'm here to speak about the reduction of class size at Bristow. I'm the current PTO president at Bristow Middle School. Represent. I have also been a parent at Bristow for 5.5 years. My family has had a wonderful experience at Bristow, and we have become friends with many of the teachers and staff throughout the years. I was saddened to learn that the class size at Bristow will be reduced from 140 students to 105 students, starting with the incoming 6th grade class. And I am concerned how this decision will impact Bristow in both the short term and long term. I don't believe this news has been publicized well, and current 5th grade parents are not being presented with the new reality of Bristow. I also believe that parents have not had the opportunity to present their opinions on this matter. One of the aspects of Bristow that I especially like is the opportunity for the entire student population of West Hartford to be represented at one school. My daughters have made friends with students from neighborhoods outside of our vicinity, and that was facilitated at Bristow. Smaller class sizes will reduce these interactions, which is something that is not replicated elsewhere in the district. After the current 6th grade class has graduated and the Bristol school population is adjusted to 315 students, will Bristol be at risk for closure? Does it make sense to not use Bristol to its fullest potential, considering the significant investment of taxpayer dollars to make Bristol a state-of-the-art facility? I believe Bristol works best at its current student population. Activities and clubs have been tuned over the years to reap the most out of the student population, and a reduction of class size may make Bristol a less attractive middle school destination for current and future 5th grade families. I've spoken to many Bristol parents, and I consistently hear one message: they are happy. They are happy with their selection of Bristol as their middle school, and they are happy with how Bristol works for their students. I hope the board will reconsider this decision to preserve Bristol's unique environment for current and future students. Thank you.
Sir. Okay. Our speaker list, and we will have another chance towards the end of the meeting. Moving to the next agenda item, which is unfinished business. I don't believe we have any, so we'll move to new business, which is the presentation of the capital improvement plan for 2019 and 2020. And it's the recommendation that the Board of Education receive the CIP for 2019-2020 and begin the process of reviewing for final approval and adoption at the February 5th, 2019 Board of Education meeting. May I have a motion? Discussion.
I think a snail left its hat up here. We're going to set that to the side. I'm sorry, is it chapeau? Thank you.
Wait a minute. Andy, wait a minute. I didn't get a second. Do I have a second motion?
I second the motion.
Thank you. I have to follow the rules.
You looked at me. I thought you wanted to start. All right, so good to be before you again. Again, this is an annual presentation that Bob and I make on the capital improvement plan. And so before you have the plan which identifies the funds that we allocate and ask the town to allocate for ongoing maintenance of our buildings, including new construction and our computer infrastructure. It includes the recommendations for 2 years, and then we also include the out years going forward for that. As you can see from page 2, with the appropriation from last year and some carryover funds, we had a rather aggressive summer and were able to complete flooring replacement and painting at King Philip, replace exterior doors at Webster Hill, playground equipment at Whiting Lane, roof replacement at KP and at Hall, and masonry repairs as well to the gym area at Hall, and replace the auditorium seating at Northfield. For the next couple of years, you see that we propose a 2-year outlook there, and it's not only maintenance projects, but there's also an add in there of $2 million for security upgrades. One of the things that we've been focusing on, as you know, is looking at entranceways for our buildings and how we can modernize an entranceway, an architecture that was designed in the 50s, 60s, and 70s and really was not designed with single point entry in mind. And so as we've done at Sedgwick, as we've done at Hall, as we've done at Charter Oak, we're proposing $2 million to enhance the entranceways into Aiken, Bugby, Connard, Duffy, KP, Northfield, Smith, Webb Hill, and Whiting Lane. We've been working with Bob, we've been working with Eric Dempsey, and we have plans to create single entry into offices that replicate the man trap that we've talked about before, where someone is buzzed into a holding area and then is buzzed directly into an office, which really is one of our main security issues at many of our elementary schools. They simply were not designed for entrance into an office. They enter into hallways. And so we think we have solutions for those. The other $250,000 that we're adding to there is to tear down and remove modular classrooms. If you remember at the end of last year, right near the end of last year, about 3 weeks before the school year ended, as part of our routine maintenance, we identified some concerns at Wolcott in the modular classrooms and some structural concerns that we brought in an engineer to look at. And over the summer, we made temporary repairs to those, but then we made the decision based on the long-term repairs that would be needed that we don't need that space anymore at Wolcott. And so we're proposing to tear down those 4 modular classrooms over this summer, and then to take down 2 modular classrooms at Northfeld that are also in similar condition. So we're available for any questions you might have.
Thank you. I just have 2 general questions. The first is that I did notice that the interior school building improvements and site and athletic field improvements are lower than the allocation for this year. I'm assuming that's because other allocations are higher and we had to keep it within budget, but I just wanted to make sure that I understood that correctly. We weren't shortchanging something.
That is correct, right. So we shift monies around based on the projects and the needs, so within the different categories.
Okay, so that you're comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay, and the second question, again, I'm assuming you're comfortable, but I just have to ask, the security changes that you're making, I noticed that some of them won't happen until 2021. That's okay if you're comfortable, but I wonder what the time pressures are and if there is any argument for pushing that stuff sooner and not others.
We've really pushed as much as we can, and we will continue to push. In fact, there's a couple that we've looked at just recently this past week to see if we can move them forward into the summer. What we run into is just an issue of architects, and then it's an issue of contractors. You know, we have certain contractors that we use for various projects, and we're constrained by a very short construction period during that time. So we absolutely do the best we can with that. What we've also put in place is for those ones that we're not going to be able to do this summer, we're continuously working with Eric to make sure that it's the best it can be until we get a chance to redo that.
Thank you.
I appreciate that question because it is something where you look at, well, why did Hall get it before Connor got it? And the fact is we can't do all of them at once. And it's almost like when you look at the roof repair where we're evaluating where can we do it, where it's 2 things kind of. Where do we have a real issue, and where is it something that it may not be that big of a fix? We can do a couple. But the fact is we only have July and August to do it. And you know how busy July and August is for Bob and his staff to start with. So everything has to go out to bid, everything has to come back from bid. And to have that many projects going on at once and be able to monitor and do them well and make sure they're to our specifications, it kind of, fortunately, unfortunately, has to be spaced out in a way that doesn't really impact the students in the building that year. Because we can't really do it in September, October, then November and December. It has to be, we have a very finite summertime.
Bob, I think I said this to you a couple of years ago because it's cyclical, but you know, for Northfeld parking lot, gas is a very low price right now, and what that's an indicator of is oil is very cheap, and what that's an indicator of is that tar and paving is relatively cheaper or less expensive. So I don't know if you look at those. I think you do. I think we talked about it. I remember when gas was under $2, we had to pave. I think it was Morley. Not Morley, Duffy. So if you're looking at those things right now, that's one thing that kind of, you know, painting, boiler replacements, those things are hit or miss. But when it comes to the oil prices, sometimes it's easy to take advantage of them, save you know, a few dollars.
The parking lot for Northfeld is the summer after this, 2020, summer 20 and 21. So it is currently in design. So it's just a matter of having enough money in the budget. So that's where it's falling out at this point. So I know it's a priority, and I know it's in rough shape. So we're trying, right? And we love
outside of the priority and aside
Sure.
of what shape it's in. I'm just talking about the price of oil
Yeah.
and the price of paving, because they're congruent with each other. So that's all I'm talking about. What the price of
Yeah, and to your example, last summer we weren't really planning on doing the hall roof section that we ended up doing, but we had gone out to bid for the KP roof, had very good success, and we just kind of tested the waters and got a really great price because there was kind of a glut in work statewide on roofings, and at least in the government world. So we got a great price, and we were able to pull that off. So we do take the opportunity sometimes when we can do it to move projects up and expedite them as we can. So we certainly will try to do that if we can. So, okay.
Good evening. 2 questions. One is, I noticed you're looking ahead to replacing the auditorium seating at Hall. Long overdue. Thank you for that. Will there be a redesign as well during that? There's no center aisle right now.
No, that's what they call continental seating.
It's very sophisticated.
It's the things you learn in this job. So, very 1970s. And to redo that is a really expensive proposition, because you would have to create new fire exiting and that type of thing, and reslope the slope and everything. So we're going to stay with the continental seating as it is for now, but do replace the seating. We have actually started to replace some seating. We've been working. West Hartford Community Theater uses that facility quite a bit. They made a nice donation for us, and we've actually replaced some seats already. So.
Second question. You'll tell me where those are, so next time I go to a show there.
First row. First row.
Thank you. My second question has to do with solar panels. Is that something that you've looked into when you go up and do roofs? Is that a possibility for our town?
Sure. Every time Catherine Devaney, who's our energy specialist, works for me. She's part-time. She works with both the board and the town. She's fantastic. So every time we do a roof project, we automatically we initiate a project afterwards to install solar. And we typically don't buy the solar systems. We do what we call a power purchase agreement, where we buy the power generated from the system. We don't own it, so that way we don't have to maintain it. It's typically a 20-year lease. So currently at Aiken, we just put one on that is this past summer generated over 80% of the power for the building that the building uses within a year. So it's a huge system. We are currently working with it. We have what we call an award from the state, which is in the LREC program, which is it's basically trading type things but we do have an award from them. We're trying to work with a solar developer to develop a large solar project for KP, since we just finished that roof last year. Again, that would provide for substantially most of that building, not all of it, but quite a bit of it. We have a large system at Conard as well. It's about 600 kW, which is quite large. Bristow has one. 100 kW does Charter Oak, and there's some smaller demonstration type systems at Wolcott and some of the other buildings. So as we have opportunities to do that, and these don't typically cost us anything, we will do that and explore those opportunities as we get them.
That's great. Thank you so much. I'm so glad I asked.
So just curious, now that I asked the question, is that I would think that you would, you install a new roof and then you're putting all those holes in it with the solar. So I was just wondering, just talk me through why you wouldn't do it prior to...
Well, we do it knowing that we're going to come back and anchor a solar system in it, so we do put penetrations in ahead of time, so that we can anchor to it. Most of the systems, though, are ballasted anyhow with cinder blocks on the system, on the roofs. There is some penetrations for electrical lines and that type of stuff, and there is, in some instances, depending on the wind load and that type of thing, they'll specify that they want a mechanical attachment. If they do, then we generally know that in advance and can do that. And it typically is not a big deal to open up the roof again and just do that, especially on a new roof. It's pretty simple to do. So.
I have a question. Going through the list, and I noticed your boiler systems, and I know we have a number of older buildings in towns, and I'm just curious in terms of the energy efficiency, in terms of how do you prioritize those boiler system replacements? Especially, I think we've been lucky thus far because we've had a pretty mild winter and we're in January, but as looking ahead, when we have some of those more colder or treacherous winters, how do you prioritize? And then what do you do with some of our buildings that have the older windows? I know there's not a lot, but I know that there's some things around energy efficiency that we can do. So would you care to comment on that?
Okay, that's a loaded question. So for boilers, so we still have several buildings that have steam systems. And those are the ones that we prioritize right now. So those are, boilers have a lifespan 30 to 40 years, so if well maintained. So they have a long lifespan, and they'll go a long time. Heating costs are not our primary driver on energy. Heating is probably on the board side about $800,000 to $900,000. The rest of it is electricity, so that's $2 to $3 million more in electricity. That's really the driver and even on the town side, it's the same. So, so the efficiency of the boiler is not so important to us because we're not really we're not spending a lot of money on that. It is an important factor when we change boilers. So when we look at in the next year, we're starting to look at King Philip right now, which is a steam system. So ideally, we would like to be able to go to a hot water system, but we have to do an analysis with an engineer to understand if the piping systems would be able to handle that, if it would be able to produce enough heat through a hot water system in order to heat that building properly. So, and that takes some time. We've done this previously at Duffy, and that was a decent, successful project. Many years, that was even before I came here. So we did it recently in Webster Library. When we did that renovation over there, we switched from a hot water system, from a steam system to a hot water system, and substantial energy savings in that area. So that's really where the savings are in the boiler world. When we do new boilers, they're high efficiency boilers, condensating boilers. They're about the size of a refrigerator. Yeah, so I mean, they're replacing these humongous room-sized boilers, and we're basically putting in a refrigerator. And typically a building like Hall or Sedgwick, what we've done in the last few years, are 4 boilers. We have redundancy in there. They're much easier to maintain, much more reliable, all computer controlled. So, so that's what we look to do. And we do have several boiler projects coming up. King Philip is the one coming up the year after next, and that's about a $1.5 million price tag for that. So it takes a couple years for us to save some money to get there, because it is a large project. And then the one after that's Webster Hill, again, another steam system. Other steam systems we have in the district are Morley, Bugby, and Morley too. So, and as far as efficiencies with windows, as you know. Yeah, so, a lot of our buildings were built in the 50s and 60s, and the design was single pane windows. We don't have the modern windows that you have in our modern buildings now, double insulated windows. And there's a reason for that, is that partly there's not modern ventilation systems in there either. So part of what those windows do is they allow air to come in, and that's part of the ventilation system. So they have minimal exhaust systems, but there's really no formal ventilation system. So they are designed to be a little bit leaky, and that is your fresh air system as well as being operable. So, but they are in rough condition. Many of the elementaries, especially the elementaries, are in very tough condition. So we're aware of that. So.
Up in terms of when you said the size of the new units are more like a refrigeration size, how do you base that upon the square footage of the building? Would you just help me understand that?
That's why you hire an engineer. We make them figure that out. Okay. Yeah. So they figure out the square footage of the building, what the heating demand is based on the climate that we live in, the zone that we live in. They calculate that out, and they also add a redundancy factor. So if we need 2 boilers, they'll probably put 3 or 4 so that we have backups. So.
The change in technology is pretty astounding, though, just in the size. We actually had to take down a wall to get the old units out of Hall, and the new ones are the size of this desk, pretty much. It's pretty astounding.
Are we ready for the vote? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Carries.
See you back on the 5th.
All right, moving to the next item under new business is the acceptance of the school construction projects as complete. And the recommendation is that the Board of Education accept the following school project as being complete and authorize the superintendent of schools to request payment of the school construction grant from the State Department of Education, in particular Conard High School partial re-roofing State Project Number 155-0238. May I have a motion?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
Questions or discussion?
This is the, do you want to explain when this comes in, how we have to,
Yeah, so this was a roofing project that we began in 2015 and completed in 2016. It was a 2-year project. And we received a state grant as part of this project, as we do for many of our projects. And there's a formal closeout process. And so what we're doing now is just asking you to accept the project as closed. The roof's been complete for a few years. It took us a while to... We had some contractor issues with this roof. So it took us some time to get the warranty information straightened out and transferred to us correctly. But we're all set with it now. We're ready to go to the state and close it out. We've received 90% of the funding from the state on this project. So there's 5% of the funds they hold back as they do a complete audit after the project is accepted as closed.
So just for me, and I know this is the case, but I want to ask the question. I'm imagining that you have a final inspection from state inspectors and town inspectors that go through and make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, right?
Yeah, so the town inspection, the town is in charge of the building inspection type of thing of that. We also have an engineer who oversees that project and inspects that on a regular basis and does a final walkthrough and closeout. And we also have the manufacturer who comes out and does an inspection and gives us a warranty on that. So and that's typically, with the roofs that we do now, it's a 30-year warranty. So there's lots of people looking at it.
All right, are we ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, vote carries. Next on the agenda is the ratification of the West Hartford Education Association contract. And the recommendation is that the Board of Education ratify the negotiated agreement between the West Hartford Education Association and the Board of Education for the period of July 1, 2019 through June 30th, 2022. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
In a second?
Second. Second.
Okay.
Good evening.
Question and discussion.
We'll walk you through a brief presentation. Before you for approval is a ratification of the collective bargaining agreement between the Board of Education and the West Hartford Education Association, which is our teachers union. The teachers ratified this contract last month, and before we get into the details of the agreement, we want to take a few minutes to walk through the process, which I think was different this year than it has been in past years, and that might be a reflection of the dozen or so teachers that were on the negotiating committee that I think did an excellent job of representing all 900 of our teachers and addressing issues that were very important to them. So the process started back in September. We had a meeting. In our first meeting, the teacher negotiation committee walked the management committee, which included the three of us, Carol, Cheryl, and Mark, through a presentation outlining some of the accolades certainly that we've received and the successes that we've had as a district over the years, talked about why teachers want to work in West Hartford, and then talked about some of the issues that they were hoping to address through this process. And we think this opening presentation really set the tone for the negotiations, because we spent a lot of time talking through issues that were really related to things that were happening in the classroom and student success and what was most important for students, not necessarily bogging down on just wages and benefits, which is what will happen often as we move through negotiations. We met several times through the fall, and I think both sides would categorize those sessions as productive. We did a lot of listening, a lot of understanding of the issues. But as we moved into December, I think both sides realized there wasn't an agreement that both sides could feel was a fair settlement. So at that point, what we had done is we invited a mediator into the process, and we met with the mediator right before Thanksgiving. And the mediator meets with both sides and attempts to bridge the gap, bring the sides closer together in terms of finding an agreeable settlement. That proved to be a little challenging as well, and we weren't able to reach a settlement through that mediation process. So at that point, if you remember, we walked away from that mediation session headed towards arbitration. So both sides had made that decision to initiate arbitration proceedings. However, in between that last mediation session and that first arbitration hearing, which I think was December 4th, we ended up settling on this contract that's before you this evening. And we think that the teachers deserve our gratitude for, yet again, agreeing to a contract, ratifying a contract that recognizes the tough economic times that we continue to face as a town and a Board of Education, all the while recognizing the hard work that they do day in and day out with our students in the classrooms. So this is a 3-year contract. We'll get into the heart of the agreement right now. So we'll start with the wage package. So it calls for step movement for any teacher that's on step in each of the 3 years. So 53% of our teachers are on step. So they're either on step 1 or through step 11. So those folks will get a step increase in each of the 3 years. Anyone who's on top step, which is step 12 of the salary scale, will get a 1.5% general wage increase in each of the 3 years. So if you're on step, you get step only, no GWI in each of the 3 years, and then if you're on top step, you'll get a 1.5% general wage increase. In terms of the healthcare and dental changes, this is an interesting change for us. We will be moving all of our teachers and their dependents off of our town-sponsored high-deductible health plan and into the state partnership plan. So we will be disenrolling our employees, our teachers and dependents off of the town plan and enrolling them in the state partnership plan, which is available to all 169 towns and boards of education around the state. So we had a couple of representatives, 3 representatives as a matter of fact, join us for a presentation during the negotiations, and they outlined the advantage of this program. And I think all of us, I can hopefully speak for all of us, felt we were impressed with the progressive approach that the state has taken to tackling healthcare costs, particularly around their aggressive wellness program. They have a plan, it's called the Health Enhancement Program, that we will have to adhere to. So all of our teachers, all of their dependents will have to adhere to this Health Enhancement Program, which is a wellness program. And folks will have to adhere to annual preventive visits, dental screenings, vision screenings, breast cancer screening, cervical cancer screening, colonoscopies, cholesterol screening, all based on certain ages. So if you hit a certain age, you have to have this certain screening done during the year of which you're covered. So if you do not adhere to that health enhancement program, then there is a penalty associated with that. So if a teacher or their dependent does not adhere to the HEP, then they will be penalized with a $100 increase in their monthly premium. So a $1,200 premium, annual premium penalty, along with being subject to additional deductibles. So a single employee who doesn't adhere to the health enhancement program will have to be part of a $350 individual deductible or $1,400 family deductible. So we feel that this plan is going to be a benefit for us, for the school district, over the next 3 years. It provides a lot of stability to our healthcare costs. They have seen their average increase year over year has been about 2 percentage points below ours, with a lot less fluctuation from year to year. So those big highs that we sometimes have and those lows, we'll be able to stabilize our healthcare costs over the next 3 years. We will increase the premium cost share from 18% to 20% effective July 1st, so that provides some additional savings. And we have some safeguards that are built into that contract as well. So if we're hit with any additional charges or if there's any substantial change to the plan, we'll have a reopener in the contract that will allow both sides to sit back down and negotiate the impact of that change. So we feel like this is a definite benefit to the school district as we move forward. Couple of other minor changes that we had for tuition reimbursement. We increased the tuition reimbursement account, the overall account, from $60,000 to $80,000 over the course of the next 3 years. So that's the total amount that's put into the account. Every teacher has the ability to use up to $1,000 a year for graduate level credits. That $1,000 per teacher stays the same. So it's just the amount that goes into the account that's being increased over the course of the next 3 years. In addition, we've formalized 2 new joint labor committee. So those will be members of management and labor that will work together on a couple of important issues that were issues for the teachers. One will be on the layoff language that's found in the contract, so we'll have one committee that's focused on the layoff language that's in the contract, another committee that will be focused on student conduct protocols in the classrooms. We have identified both members for both of those committees, and we'll begin work over the next couple of weeks and should have the work of those 2 committees completed by the start of the contract July 1st. So we wanted to again thank the board members, Cheryl, Carol, and Mark, for their participation in this process from start to finish. There's a lot of time and effort on your behalfs, right up into and including the signing of the tentative agreement. And again, wanted to say, thank our teacher negotiation committee, a couple who are here, David Simon and Ted Gerner, and others for their efforts in really, as I said, setting the tone at the start of the process. And again, spending a lot of time and effort and collaboration and working on a contract that we think is fair for both the town and for the teachers. At this point, we'd be welcome to answer any questions that you had or any statements that you wanted to make.
I just want to thank you, Rick, and the group, teachers, and Chip and Andy. And Rick, you could not have summarized that. I want people listening at home in the group here, you could not have summarized that any better. That was spot on, perfect. So those people at home are listening. You've got a great overview of that, so well done. And it was great working with everyone. It really was. You know, you come to the table, not everyone agrees, but yet everyone walks away shaking hands and smiling. So it was a very well done process. I've been on it two times now, and this was definitely better. As far as, you know, even though we went to arbitration and such, it still was a very, very good process. So I wanted to thank all those involved.
Thanks.
I too want to echo Mark's comment. You summed that up beautifully, and just working with all of you was a joy. I heard, you know, stories, and when I, you know, came to the table, I was really pleasantly surprised, and the outcome was even better. But I do want to thank the teachers and the teacher representatives that were around the table, Dave, you as well, the attorneys that were involved, the mediator and the arbitrator, and thank goodness we didn't have to, you know, go the route that we thought that we would have to go. But I really want to say that everyone really worked hard, and our school district remains excellent and attractive because of the hard work of our teachers. I think our teachers are gems. I like jewels. I know a lot of women like jewelry, and I like to think of our teachers and our students as gems because they're special, and they're successful because of our teachers who do all the hard work and the heavy lifting. And they come to school every day, year by year, and they give their all. And that's why our students can graduate at the end of those 12 years and be successful in terms of whatever they choose, whether it's college or whether they want to do a gap year or if they want to go out into the work world and start that road, off with a good foot. And I just want to recognize the teachers because a lot of times, I don't want to say that we forget them, but sometimes they feel that they don't get the credit that they deserve. And I just want to go on record as saying you are all doing a fantastic job. And I thank you.
Oh, I'd just like to go on the record. As many of you know, I happen to be married to a teacher, an employee of the district, and the same is true for Rob. And as such, it would be a conflict of interest if we were to participate in this vote. and will be abstaining from the vote is not an opinion or reflection on the contract itself. Thank you.
Okay, with that said, we're ready to vote. So all in favor?
Aye.
No opposed, but we do have 2 abstentions. Thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the adoption of our annual board meeting schedule for 2019 and 2020. It's recommended that the Board of Education review and revise as appropriate the proposed annual board meeting schedule and adopt a final meeting calendar for the 2019-2020 school year. May I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Discussion or questions?
I think one of the things that you'll see when we look at the calendar, and this comes up every year, really January 7th board workshop is a placeholder. Oftentimes that workshop will schedule because we'll have an outside presenter. Oftentimes we'll talk about legal issues and roles of the board, roles of the superintendent, that kind of topic. And because of that, we can't really schedule it right now, and we want to get everybody's availability. So the 7th is the placeholder, and it takes place at some point in January. Besides that, this looks pretty much like the calendar.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, motion carries. Right into the staff communication and reports. Welcome, Mr. Superintendent's report.
Thanks, Carol. I do want to mention a couple specifics before I forget. Martin Luther King Jr. program here at 10 o'clock on Monday in the Town Hall Auditorium. Annual program, great program. And I know next year, this year, Henley Solomon will actually be our former board rep. Will be back and will be master of ceremonies for parts of it, so for the ceremony. So it's, I'll get back to you. The past 2 weeks, month, have been really difficult for West Hartford, made more difficult this weekend. Our thoughts were with the family of Jody Monroe, who taught in West Hartford for her entire 34-year career. She passed away this weekend after a battle with cancer. She was a fixture at Morley and will be missed, and we actually are fortunate enough that last year we did a video of Ryan Cleary did a video for the 50th anniversary of Morley, and he sent the 3-minute clip, 3 minutes of clips of Jody talking about her time at Morley, what it meant to her, and shared it with the staff the other day, and really touching and inspiring. In addition to that, I'd be remiss to not thank the entire community for how they've treated us in the schools, the patience they've had, the thanks they've given, people bringing by food to our teachers, offering to take care of things. It's been inspiring for me as a West Hartford Public Schools employee. And specifically at Sedgwick, the work the staff has done while they're all hurting to take care of our kids, while we try to make sure we're taking care of our staff also. The work of our mental health professionals has been one of the most inspiring things I've ever witnessed, to sit through as they talk about every kid that came down, and then the next day, at the end of the day, a long meeting that they all stay for to say, okay, and go through the list of every child, who checked in with them, who met with them today. And that's continuing as we go forward, knowing kids that we just want to make sure that we're talking to. The professionalism, the expertise, and really, Gretchen wouldn't want thanks because she'd want to go to her professionals, but her organization for this has been exceptional. And it's been a difficult time, and to thank just Sedgwick, we pulled people out of all of our buildings, which meant all of the principals, and we sent extra staff to Duffy, obviously for logical reasons, and Bristow and King Philip. And the way staff picked each other up, covered for each other, walking through Sedgwick, just going in, talking to a teacher, hey, why don't you take a break? I'll come in. It has been one of the saddest parts of my career, but also one of the most inspiring. This is a very special place that I am honored to be a part of, and I am so proud of our kids, our parents, our teachers, and all of our mental health professionals for the work that they've done. So I just want to say publicly thanks to all of them, because it was incredible.
Oh, go ahead.
I want to give you a little perspective as well. As I happened to have an opportunity to come down that particular night of that tragic day, and I came in and everybody was up in the conference room, and you know, I've been in a lot of chaotic situations with the military and such, and when I walked in, it was like only can describe it as well, pure professionalism, but like a duck. And I think I said this to Tom. It was you walk in and everyone is working very vigilantly and hard, but yet on the surface you don't see it. So it's like a duck paddling in water, getting where it needs to go. It gracefully gets there, but underwater what you don't see is the paddling of the duck. And that's what I witnessed when I came in. The whole group administration was there, and I just sat there really in silence, just there to add my support, and I was just overwhelmed with the professionalism and at the caring and empathy that went into it, and I too was taken back by it, and getting little goosebumps even talking about it right now, because what went on in that room was spectacular, and I couldn't have been prouder. So Tom, you led a great team, and that team of pulled everyone through, as you mentioned, and I just want that knowledge outside of you, Tom, you know, talking about it, but because what I witnessed was truly inspiring and very well done. So thank you.
To also share as well, last week I attended a SAPC meeting, Substance Abuse Prevention Commission meeting, and as we're talking about the pieces involved with that commission, a topic that came up was how are things happening in terms of what happened in December. And I gave a summary of how responsive you have been and all of the administrators have been from the jump in terms of proactively being available to the students and also being available to the teachers as well. And throughout the room, everyone was quite impressed with that. And there was one participant who said not only was she impressed, but she unfortunately recalled an incident that happened many, many years ago before everyone's here time, where unfortunately from her report, the response was not as proactive. It was kind of a, let's just keep moving. And in comparison to what's happening now, spoke volumes. So I echo what has been shared. Thank you so much for your leadership. Everyone else, Gretchen, everyone else, thank you so much for what you're doing. And also what I'm impressed with, not only your timeliness in addressing the needs of our young people, but also forgetting the importance, or rather not forgetting the importance of recognizing the needs of you as well. And with you all looking out for each other and checking in, because we know that we're not going to be good to anyone if we don't take care of ourselves as adults also. So thank you so much for your compassion and dedication.
Okay, thank you, Tom. So we will now move into the student rep reports, and it's up to either of you who wishes to go first.
Everyone, it's been a little while, so I'll highlight some events that have been going on at Conard, and I'll mention a few things that are upcoming. So before winter break, Conard students collected clothes and gifts for children in the West Hartford area to be given out during the holiday season for the annual Holiday Helpers fundraiser. Also, back in December on Human Rights Day, freshman, sophomore, and junior class homerooms had discussions about human rights that were led by student leaders, and then the seniors attended a presentation where local artists across the Connecticut area presented their art, and they talked about how they incorporate human rights into their art pieces. Conard drama students took part in Fictional Character Day by dressing up as a character of their choice, and then during the school day they stayed in character all day in the lobby area, and it was really fun to see all of them dressed up as their different characters from different books and movies and that sort of thing. College Knowledge Night was hosted last week. Representatives from 5 different colleges were there on hand to answer questions about the college process for juniors and seniors. Additionally, the Gap Year Fair was also last week for students who wanted to explore a gap year. Members of the Future Educators of Diversity read to students at Duffy, Wolcott, and Whiting Lane. The National Honor Society hosted 2 Study with the Buddy sessions for students who wanted help with preparing for midterms. Conard and Hall Orchestra students performed at Governor Ned Lamont's inaugural reception. I probably should be better at saying that. Coming up next Wednesday on January the 23rd at 7 p.m. is the 8th grade parent night for incoming parents to learn more about Conard. The PTOs of Conard and Hall are hosting a presentation on combating vaping use and e-cigarettes and that sort of thing next Thursday, the 31st at 7 p.m. at Conard. Congratulations to Megan Goulet for being recognized as a national winner of the NCWIT Aspirations in Computing Award. The Conard Hall basketball games are this weekend with the boys on Friday and the girls on Saturday. And lastly, Conard is busy preparing for midterms, which start on Thursday and end next Wednesday. Wish us luck.
Hi, everyone. Happy New Year. Right now, everyone at Hall is in midterm mode since testing starts Thursday. These are my last semester exams, so devastated about that. Today, Link Crew hosted an event called Cocoa and Cram, which is an after-school event where Link leaders help freshmen with their midterm review and they get hot chocolate. So it's a really fun way to connect freshmen with upperclassmen. And it will be running it tomorrow as well. Winter sports season has been doing fantastic. Girls hockey is currently #1 in the state. And this past weekend, the Hall boys indoor track team won the Yale Cup. And the boys distance medley relay is currently #1 in the nation with a time of 10:22. So you can just trust me, that's really fast. The next Black Box show, These Shining Lives, tells the story of the Radium Girls in the 1920s, and the show will open at the end of the month, so feel free to come and see. And lastly, if you need dinner plans tonight, head to Savoy, because a portion of their profits from either dine-in or takeout orders will be donated to Hall's Safeguard Committee. Guilt-free because you're supporting a good cause. Thanks, everyone.
Megan and Gus. Next up on the agenda is staff reports and board discussions. Number 1 is the multi-year enrollment projections, where Mr. Chip Ward will give us a background and report.
This is a devastating night for me in that this is Chip's last long-term enrollment projection. It's worth it to pause now and tell you that this is something that every other district contracts out and pays and gets these reports in, and Chip's done them every year for us, and 20 years. And I always find it to be one of the most interesting reports we get. Actually, I meant to bring it down. I've been reading a book of the impact on demographic trends on higher education over the next 10, 15 years, and what it means in that what we've been feeling in New England, which I kept saying to people when I met with college administrators, now they're beginning to feel in New England. But it will be a national trend, because what I want to echo that Chip's going to say is what we talk about is the baby boom, and then we had the baby boom echo, and now we're entering the trough after the baby boom echo. So when people say, why are people leaving West Hartford? That's not really the case. It's a question of births are down. It's not an exodus from West Hartford. We've actually been stable compared to most communities. And this will come up, but I want to kind of introduce it this way. I want you to remember, if people ask you the question, well, if we've had declining enrollment, why haven't we seen the impact? We've seen a huge impact. We have 28 less classrooms now than we did 7 years ago. So when people say, why don't you close a building? We have. 28 is bigger than Duffy, which is our largest elementary school. And now you're seeing the process of us taking off the portables, which are kind of affectionately referred to as energy pigs. That process of every year that it used to be coming to the board when I was in Andy's position, I was first there and saying, okay, where are we putting portables this year? Okay, where are we putting that $500,000 in the CIP for this summer? That ended, and now we're going to another period. But the other thing I want to remind people is this isn't a period where it's like, boy, the district's never been here before. We're just going back to where we were 15 years ago. You know, so it's kind of that cycle, and then we'll see if there's ever a baby boom echo. Well, other people will see it. I probably won't, and Chip definitely won't see it here. So with that, Chip.
All right, well, good evening. We're going to split this sort of into two parts of the presentation. First, boy, it's been a while since I've been here.
First time jitters.
It's been a while. You got it. So I'll do the first part talking about the traditional enrollment projections presentation. Then we'll talk about the impact that it has at the middle school level. These projections are started soon after we filed the October 1st enrollment report, and they're traditionally have been given in the second week of November, but a series of events has transpired so that we're now about 2 months behind our normal schedule. Otherwise, we would have been doing this 2 months ago. So first, I want to give you a little bit of perspective for the last 70 years. This shows the enrollments over time. The blue line is the enrollments. The left-hand edge is the 1947-1948, right after World War II. And the right-hand column is 2018-2019. So, 70 plus years of enrollments. Enrollments were under 6,000 students in the immediate post-war period, and then the baby boom came. And the baby boom came and had a dramatic impact on West Hartford. As I mentioned, the blue line is the total number of students with the left axis. The purple line is the change in the number of students from one year to the next, and its axis is on the right. As you can see, in those periods of times, they went from 5,000 to almost 13,000, 12,000 students in about 10 years or so. They average somewhere between 600 and 800 students, new students every year. Okay, that's 2 elementary schools worth of students. That's 1 middle school worth of students. In 2 years, that's a high school's worth of students. It was a very crazy time back then. But, I mean, enrollment projections being what they are, the kids were born 5 years earlier, they knew this was coming. So this was just, and economically, was not unique to West Hartford, this was throughout the country. There's just this massive building boom of schools that happened in that period. And we ended up with 15 elementary schools, 4 middle schools, and 2 high schools at that time period. And then things sort of stabled off in the 1960s, and we were calm. And then we had that big drop when the baby boom started leaving the school system, and it dropped from around 13,000 students to bottoming out around 7,000 students over the course of about 15 years. It fell, it didn't fall quite as, it went up at around 600 to 800 students a year, it only dropped between 400 to 500 students a year. Still, that's an elementary school's worth of kids every year. So this was a very challenging time for the district. They closed a lot of elementary schools, they closed a lot of middle schools, they reorganized the high schools from 10-12 to 9-12. So it was a very, very interesting period of time. Then the nadir was hit sometime around the mid-1980s, and we had that gradual climb back up. And we went up from around 7,000 students up to a little low peak of around 10,000. These are just K-12 students. But the enrollment growth was a much smaller growth rate of 100 to 200 students. And now, or maximum maybe 300 students. Now since 2009, 2010, we've dropped from around 10,000 students to around 9,300 students, or roughly around 100 students a year. Again, you see the fall off is not quite as big as the drop, as the rate of increase was. But it's a much smaller level of decline than we experienced the last time. So it's a much calmer period here. One of the big drivers of that has been the bursts in West Hartford. And there are two lines plotted here. The black line is the number of bursts that occur in West Hartford, and the purple line is the number of bursts that occur statewide. And I've been doing this for a long period of time, so I basically set the scale so that the numbers were similar in the 1990s, early 1990s, and you can see in the state of Connecticut, bursts peaked in around 1990 at around 50,000 bursts, and then they've declined by about a third to 35,000 bursts since that period of time, in a pretty steady decline. West Hartford had a very different trend. We had continued growth of enrollment of bursts, peaking somewhere in the mid-aughts, somewhere between 2001 and 2005. And then now, since that period of time, we've had that gradual decline in the bursts since that point in time, reflecting just the overall nature, demographics of the economy. So you take the bursts and then you combine that with a cohort survival ratio. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what is that cohort survival ratio. It's a very simple, it has this great, whoever created this, I love it. I mean, it sounds really complicated, but it's really quite simple. So it's just the ratio of a cohort of students as they move from one grade level to the next. And so let me give you a couple of specific examples. In 2018, October 1st, so we compare October 1st to October 1st, we had 638 second grade students compared to 634 first grade students in October 1 of 2017. So the CSR for that is 638 divided by 634, which is 1.0063. In 2018, we had 707 sixth grade students, but we compared to 729 fifth grade students, so the cohort survival ratio is 707 divided by 729, so that's 0.9698. And then kindergarten is the 1 year where we don't know, we don't have a complete census of what happened in the 4-year-olds or the 3-year-olds. We have to go, the last time we have a complete census is the public health records, which records births in West Hartford. So in 2018, we had 615 kindergartners compared to, coincidentally, 615 births 5 years ago. So just coincidental, it was, we'll show you some of the ranges. So it's 1.00. So what does that CSR account for? It's this thing that accounts for all these factors that are really part and parcel of the enrollment projections. One is families moving to West Hartford for the schools. We have an above 1.0 cohort survival ratio, so we have more kids each year, so there are more kids moving in. There are families choosing to send students to the private or parochial or magnet schools. Okay, so we've got lots of choices for parents, what type of schools they want to send their kids to. And there's certain points where we see that cohort survival ratio, the CSR, drop below 1, which is typically at the 5th to 6th grade. This also captures this whole families coming or leaving to West Hartford due to economic reasons, and we'll talk a little bit about that in terms of what happened in the Great Recession. And it also captures that turnover in the real estate market as new families move out, and new families move in, and the old ones move out, reflecting that growth of students. So once we get all those birth rates and the cohort survival ratios, we can then begin to do our projections. But we have to talk a little bit about what do those cohort survival ratios look like. So here is the last 10 years of the birth to grade K cohort survival ratios. Typically this number, historically in the past, and we've got it back to 1993, has averaged about 1.08 or so, something like that. But in more recent years, it's been a lower number. And particularly if you look at 2014 and 2015, that's 5 years after 2009, 5 years after 2010. Those are not the best times in Connecticut. And we just had more kids born in West Hartford than actually came into kindergarten. And we looked, it's not that we lost them to magnet schools or we lost them to private schools. We were able to track all that stuff. They just weren't here. 2017, the cohort survival ratio came back up to a more typical level of about 1.04. 2018, as we showed earlier, it's exactly 1.0. The final column on the right is the base. That's what we use to project going forward. So we get the bursts and then we do the cohort survival ratio. So we just use a simple 3-year average to try and capture the most 3 years most recent data on that. Let's take a look at the average cohort survival ratio. This is all the individual cohort survival ratios, birth to grade K, K to 1, 1 to 2, all the way up to 11 to 12. And you can see that the average cohort survival ratio typically is somewhere between 1.00 to 1.01, except for those periods 13, 14, 15. That's that, big economic impact in the 08 recession, and you can see that. 2017, we had a really strong cohort survival ratio, and it dropped down a bit in 2018 to just a little bit above 1.0. That's the normal. We get those normal types of variations over the course of the years. It's nothing unusual. The average cohort survival ratio is about 1.008, so that means we average 0.8% more kids each grade level as they go forward, or approximately about 6 or so kids per grade, 6 to 7 kids per grade level. So that then, the other things that we try and keep track of, and I try and report to you in this time period is, parents have other choices for schools, and one of those is private schools and private school enrollment. So I have private school enrollments for October 1 of 2017. October 1, we were always sort of a year behind on that data. So if you take a look at that right-hand column, that gives you the average. So in 1996, 12% of our students went away to private school. In 2017, it had dropped to 8.8%. And you see the biggest drop occurred in the elementary levels. Grade K, we've gone now to full-time K, so that's recaptured some people, and also our elementary schools continue to grow. We've also reduced the number of 6th graders and reduced the number of 7th and 8th graders. There still is roughly the similar number of high schoolers that choose to go to private school as there was 20 years ago. A more recent trend has been the growth of student enrollment in other public school districts. We have the CREC interdistrict magnets. We also have the Hartford host magnets where students can go. There are other interdistrict magnets, and you can see here that enrollment peaked in 2014, 2015 at about 539 students, or about 5% of our student population. And since then, it's dropped to around 428, in line with our overall enrollments. The biggest decline has been in the pre-K, where we had 203 students at pre-K, obviously opening Charter Oak. That increased our number of pre-K spaces substantially. And that has brought back kids in the pre-K. So when you combine those birth rates, you combine those cohort survival ratios, you do all of those projections, then we can do these additional projections in the out years, which are now shaded in the orange. And so you can see the trend in since the peak is projected to continue. You saw that in the birth rates, a gradual decline in the birth rates. Our cohort survival ratios are relatively stable. So I'm projecting we're going to lose anywhere from 50 to 150 students per year for the next 10 years, averaging around 100 students or so per year. So we're going to drop another 1,000 students in the next 10 years to around 8,300. Don't know when it's going to turn around. I don't see that quite yet. I mean, it's got, the birth rates need to stabilize a bit, and then we'll begin to see the enrollments project in the out years stabilize. So we'll take a look in more detail here at the different levels. The top line is the elementary schools. The elementary schools peaked at around 4,700 students in the 2009 to 2011 timeframe, and have been in a steady decline, heading down to probably around 3,600 students by the time we get to 2024, 2025. The next line down is the high school students. Those have been relatively stable at 3,000 students for the last 10 years. It's going to stay at 3,000 students for the next 4 or 5 years, and then gradually begin to fall off down to around 2,800 or so students. And then the bottom line is the middle schools, which have also stayed relatively constant at around 2,200 students for the last 10 years or so, but is now just beginning, next year will be flat, and then beginning to decline in the out years to somewhere around 1,850 students or so in the out years. So those are the general discussions about the enrollment projections. So I'm going to stop right here and see if anybody's got any questions about the overall enrollment projections before we go into what the impacts are going to be in the future.
Questions? No?
Okay.
Okay.
So we can talk about, so what are the responses to decline enrollment? So as enrollment grew, we added schools. We'll talk a little bit about that. Now, as it, and it peaked in about 8 to 10 years ago. Now, as enrollment shrinks, we're gradually reducing FTEs. first at the elementary school level, then at the middle school level, and ultimately at the high school level in the end of towards the out years of projections. In 1920, we're going to begin to see the impacts at the middle school level in terms of what staffing we're proposing. So we're shrinking Bristow from 140 per grade level to 105 to 110 per grade level, starting with next year's 6th grade. So let's take a look at what total enrollment has been. This goes just in the last 20 years or so, from 1988, and then projecting out 10 years in the future. So 96, 97, we started at 7,200 students and grew steadily to around 10,000 students. In 95, 96, we opened Smith School. In 2005, 2006, we opened Bristow. And then our enrollment peaked, and you can see we're gradually declining back down. So in the 10th year, we're sort of back to where we were before Smith School opened. We're not projecting that any of these schools are going to close. It just sort of gives you an idea of how we add schools, but then when we shrink, we don't shrink quite to the level that we were before. So if we take a look at specifically what's happened at elementary schools, Smith School opened in 95, 96 when we had 192 sections across the district. We peaked at around in 2009, 2010 at 231 sections of elementary school, and we're now sort of about halfway through the decline process in the elementary school enrollments. We've dropped from 231 to 203, as Tom mentioned. That's 28 sections. That's basically a school's worth of students. I'm projecting when we're all said and done, we'll probably be down to 190 sections. So it's another 13 sections. So we're maybe 2/3 of the way down in terms of the number of sections to reduce. At the middle school level, the middle school was fairly stable and then started to grow in the early 90s. And we finally opened Bristow in 2005, 2006. We could have opened it a couple years earlier. We had some really, anyone who had middle school kids at that time, no, it was we had 2,200 kids in Sedgwick and KP. It was a very, very tight time frame there. And then the middle school enrollment has stayed relatively constant since then, and now is beginning to start that decline in the out years. So let me talk a little bit about each of the schools. So the red bar is the actual enrollment in the school, okay, and the blue line is the enrollment in the attendance zone, or is the enrollment So obviously those two lines are the same before Bristow was opened, because there only was King Philip and Sedgwick. But once Bristow is open, then there's the gap that's performed between those two. And that difference then is the students that are going from the KP attendance zone to Bristow. So, and the approximate capacity of KP, somewhere around 1,050 to 1,100. We added a 7th grade wing. We added a bunch of portables. We're just trying to deal with the incredible, and as you can see, in the early years of the aughts, it was pretty darn crowded at KP. And they were really stuffed. But by that time, we had already made the decision to open Bristow, and it was under construction, and it was built in 2.5 years. It was a very quick turnaround. The enrollment just never stopped climbing. So then, since that point in time, King Philip has dropped to an enrollment of somewhere around 900 students. They had a peak enrollment year in 2016, 2017 of almost 1,000 students, but typically around 900 students. But it's now in the beginning to drop to under 750 students in the out years. And the attendance zone itself is dropping to 900 students. And that's a primary reflection of an interesting differential in the cohort survival ratios. As I mentioned, the overall cohort survival ratio in grades 5 to 6 this year was around 0.96, so about 4% of our students left from 5th grade to 6th grade. They all left in the KP zone. So in Sedgwick, it was basically 100%, and in KP, it was about 7% of the students left. And that's different than that's been a relatively recent change in the last 3 or 4 years. Back when I first started doing these enrollment projections in the 90s and the 99s and the 90s and the aughts, it was relatively even. We would lose 7 to 8% of our students each year from 5th grade to 6th grade. That's very natural. That's when there's a change in our school structure. That's when a lot of spaces open up in the private and parochial schools in the 6th grade. So it was a natural breaking point. But in recent years, we've seen a lot more coming out of King Philip, attendance zone going to private and parochial schools, and relatively stable at Sedgwick going out. And you can see that reflected in the enrollment projections. Sedgwick, it doesn't have quite as much capacity. Obviously, it's a smaller site. We really, at one point, we looked at taking over the ball field, trying to make some space, but we decided that was just too much, and we went the way of opening Bristow School. So their enrollment trend, again, they peaked somewhere around 1,100 students in that 2004-2005 school year, and they were breathing a sigh of relief when Bristow opened for the 2005-2006 school year. And they've been relatively stable at around 900 students or so. 900 students is sort of a nice size. That gives you 900 students, 300 students per grade level, 3 teams of 100 students per grade level. So it's sort of that nice, where we wanted to shoot for. And that's why we designed both of these. Designed Bristow at its size around 420, which is a little bit in between, middle school sizes, so we could get KP and Sedgwick down to that 900 student school. And as you can see, both of them were about at that 900 student level for most of the time since Bristow's open. It's just now we're beginning to, we used to have 750 kids per grade level. Now we're going to 650 kids per grade level. So it's just, we're dropping by 1/6. So it's time to begin to take a look at the solution. And so what we're proposing is we're dropping the number of spaces at Bristow from 140 to 105. That will be able to be handled with one team of 4 teachers instead of, whoops, let me get ahead, instead of a team of 6 teachers, which is what's used for 140. So those are the 4 core subject areas: math, science, social studies, and world language, science and language arts. World language will remain off team. Once we added Chinese, we moved it off team. So and staffing is just, obviously in that case, is based on demand. In the unified arts, because we got 140 kids, we needed 6 places for them to go. So 140 divided by 6 is 23. So with 105 to 110 students, we're only going to need 5 rotations for them to go. So eventually the number of rotations that will be needed for unified arts will drop from 6 to 5. 5 is the number of rotations that each team gets currently at Sedgwick and KP. And then obviously as Bristow shrinks from 420 to 315 students, administrative staff needs will be reviewed as it gets to a different size.
So a couple points on this, because I appreciate people that love Bristow, and I love all of our middle schools. We do a great job. So this would have been presented a month ago, and this was moved off since that time. And it's since that time I've met with the Bristow staff twice. Andy and I went over. I can say that Andy has been a key person with this, because nobody knows Bristow better than Andy, having been principal there for so long. And Steve Cook and I have also talked throughout this, and I really appreciate his presence answering questions from his staff, because anytime we do this, and I almost don't, it's a question of, because the board isn't doing this, this is administrative, because that's what we do. We decide on class sizes per grade. And the big impact we see is often 3rd to 4th grade. Those are the letters you've gotten over the years, because the class size is allowed to increase then, and so you see people that are going from 4 sections to 3 sections, and parents are often worried. We've had 28 teachers move their positions over the past few years. We've been fortunate enough, because of retirements and shifts, we haven't had to lay people off during this time. At the middle school and high school, it's a little bit different, because oftentimes, I always say, we don't cancel a course, the students do if they don't choose it at the high school. And so that can fluctuate with people by subject area. But what this does at the middle school levels allows us to keep King Philip, for now, and Sedgwick in that 900-person zone, which allows for 3 teams of 100, which basically equals out 3 teams of 100, 105, 99, depending on the year, as you look at the numbers, and that equals out with Bristow. The benefit of this is there's not somebody losing anything, in that basically what's happening is 3 less kids about from each elementary school will have a lottery number that's selected. But what I point out is that's out of a smaller pool of students. And so it's actually the chances of getting a number that will get you into Bristow are the same as they were when we had a large number of students, about a 16% decrease on both sides. So we did think of that as we looked at this. It's also, we believe that this won't impact the program at Bristow. You'll still have your team. We'll still have after-school activities, all those being funded. Nothing's changing there. The opportunities for kids at Bristow will be what they are. 310, 315, 320 kids is not considered a small middle school in Connecticut. It's considered small in West Hartford in relation to Sedgwick and King Philip. So we're trying to do what we think is the best thing for this cohort of 6th graders that are coming up, to make sure that we can maintain our team structures. We presented last year, and our middle school's principals talked about that. I've explained it to the staff, and as we begin having our 5th grade parent nights, we'll explain it during those 5th grade parent nights with our principal that this is how we're doing this. 6th grade's beginning to, I mean, the issue here is really 6th grade's now being hit with what's been hit at the elementary schools every year up till now. So, you know, I didn't really have a meeting to discuss Webster Hill going down 2 sections in a grade, but that's happened. People didn't like it, understandably, but we relate to numbers so that we can operate efficiently. The thing that I want to stress to people is we're going down in 6th grade, no matter what. We're going down across the board. 3 years from now, I'll be going to Conard and Hall, God willing, and I'll be talking to their teachers about, okay, we're about to see declines now hitting the high school. Here's what's going to happen as our course selections come in, and here's what's going to happen with staffing, and here's how we'll adjust staffing. So the 2 people, whoever it may be, because we don't know. We don't know what retirements will happen in 6th grade. We don't know what retirements will happen across the board. We don't know if people will. I've already had a conversation with somebody that said, I might want to go to the high school. Is there going to be an opening? And I said, actually, there may be. So that's an added benefit. And Andy, I don't know if there's anything you want to add with you as you've come through this.
Tom pretty much summarized it all, but, you know, I would think that Dave can certainly speak to this as well. But as a parent whose 2 children went to Bristow, as someone who is extremely proud of the school and the work that all of the teachers did when I was there for 5 years, change is not easy. And this is certainly uncomfortable for people because it is changing a structure, but we've changed before. Dave was there when we used to have 2-person teams and 4-person teams, and I switched everything to the 1 team at grade levels, you know, 5, 6, 7 years ago. So Bristow's had a bunch of different formats and a bunch of different structures, and this will be different, and 3 years from now it will operate a little bit differently, but I think it will still have the character of the school. I think it will still have exceptional teachers, and I think it will still have kids who excel and find a home there. I think this is the best solution as we talk about our obligation to the district and our obligation to taxpayers to make sure that we're staffing appropriately. This is just that enrollment bubble we've seen go through the elementaries, hitting the middle schools. And it's better to do it this way than it is to deal with half teams at the other 2 schools. Because as you know, we've talked about in the past, that doesn't provide that sense of community that we really look for in middle school. And teaming is important. And I think that everyone when we talked a couple of years ago about budget cuts, we had that on the table and we realized how important teaming was to the middle school structure, especially at that 6th and 7th grade level. And so this is a change, yes, but we think it's a change that makes the most of what we have to work with.
I'd like to just ask a question because I know that these questions are out there in our community, and I'd like you all to speak to it in terms of Bristow closing.
I'm glad you brought that up, and Bristow's not closing. We don't, I mean, if you go back to the space, we don't have the space to close Bristow. You know, it's just, that's not happening, just like the other schools not. I can't project far beyond 10 years from now. I can comfortably say I will not be the superintendent that closes Bristow because the numbers will not bear it out. We're not going back to 2 overstuffed middle schools unless something cataclysmic were to happen. I never say never anymore, I've learned, but that is... I've had that where somebody has said, well, is this just the first step to you closing Bristow? It's almost the exact opposite. No, this is establishing a new size for Bristow, that this is a 310, 315, 320 person school now, and we operate with the team structure the way it is, and Sedgwick and King Philip are allowed to operate the team structure they are at, and hope to optimize all 3 schools, that all 6 grades across the district, no matter what number they get, don't get, have the best possible experience.
Follow up on what Dr. Morrow mentioned. Yes, my children also went to Bristow. I'm very proud to be a Bristow dad. One of the things I've learned being on the board and visiting the different schools is how unique every school is and the changes that do happen over time. In my time at Webster Hill, that school was packed. We had teachers with offices and closets, and the language teacher had a cart, you know, that kind of thing. So for me to hear Webster Hill has extra room, it's just hard to wrap my head around that. There was a point when we had to move some students who were bused to Webster Hill. They called it a spot redistricting. Mark, you may have been on the board at that time, I'm not sure. But, you know, we moved some students to Duffy, you know, and we were very sad to lose those students. They were part of our family. But it's part of the change and the adjustments that you have to do. And we've done it before, done it with different things. This is a continuation of that. One of my favorite stories, Andy, about Bristow is... in the band and orchestra. You know, when you have a random lottery where students get a number, it doesn't take into account what instruments the students play. And you might wind up with 5 trumpet players one year. But you know what? They make it works. It always works. It balances out. And my daughter, for example, is a great example. She played flute. There were a number of flute players in 7th grade. Mr. Schofer, kudos to him, he said, hey, Allison, do you want to try bassoon? She's playing bassoon now and has been playing for years. It's great. It's been a great thing. I'll probably pay her way through college. Thank you, Mr. Schofer. You know, but it's just one small example of how things can adjust and they work out. As I'm hearing you speak, Tom, about the portables, which didn't occur to me when Bob was here, and I'm panicking in my mind, but I know you guys have it taken care of, is I know in a lot of schools the cooling plan involves going down to the portables, spending time, because those are the classrooms that have air conditioning, and those are gone. But I know you've got to figure it out, so it's good. Our team, as has been mentioned tonight, and Chip, you will be missed, you know, looks at all the variables and the situations, and I know you've got this one covered as well.
I just had a quick question, not about Bristow. That was all really great. I was looking at some of the projections in the out years for our elementary schools, Chip, and when you gave us that nice presentation about the history of when I didn't realize we had 15 elementary schools at one point. I'm a transplant guy, so I still learn new things all the time. So can you give an opinion about what was a tipping point with some of our elementary schools that we decided to merge or close? Because as I see in the out years that some of the schools are dropping down below 300 or even into the high 2s. Historically, when did we in the past say, you know, that population is so small now that it now is something to consider where you would close a school wholesale? Like, when should we be worried or concerned that that facility, something's going to happen to it? Like, we can't just reduce sections or something like that.
When you were closing schools, you were losing 400 to 500 kids a year. So, I mean, that was a massive signal in terms of that you really were substantially overbooked. And you went from, you know, I don't have the elementary enrollments easily here, but I think you went from 6,000 to 3,000 students. You dropped the elementary schools in half, and you went from 15 to maybe 9 schools or so, something like that. So you never quite get down there. So I wasn't around here when they were closing schools. But based on those numbers, I'm sure your schools were, there wasn't anybody left.
If you were to talk to some of the old timers in West Hartford, as I have, they will tell you some stories about decision to sell some of the buildings that they regret or question now as that process went on. One of the things that I can tell you is that part of it is contiguity, where you had a neighborhood that went down, and therefore, okay, you can take these two and put them together. So, in complete candor, 2 years ago when we were in budget crisis and we were doing the long-term enrollment projections, we were looking at everything, and we looked at each school, okay, what could we do? And we could never get to 2 or 3 schools that we could combine into 2 or 1. The only way to close one school was to redistrict all 11 schools, to spread them out, because we haven't had that dramatic loss in any one place. Duffy's basically stayed steady. Beyond that, what else has stayed steady? Bugby. But everywhere else, it's like kind of like you're losing 2 classrooms or 3 classrooms. Whiting Lane has lost more, but the whole ELC is housed at Whiting Lane, so that's not really counted in the number of classrooms in the same way as we're looking at the K through 5 enrollment. So Whiting Lane's an outlier with that. So we don't have and Chip, you know the numbers better. We don't have that kind of.
I don't see us ever getting to the point where you could identify. You could close a school and say, okay, we're going to send those kids from school A to school B. There isn't, I don't see that in the projections. I mean, you would have to have a substantial decline in the number of births, because just the way our schools are organized. So you're not going to be able to do that. So instead of sending school A to school B, you're going to have to take, okay, we're send a quarter of school A to school B, a quarter to school C, a quarter to school D, and a quarter to school E. I mean, those are the types of redistrictings that you're going to have to do, and even then, we don't have the space in those schools to handle all those kids. So
yeah, I was just, but I wasn't asking you to. I mean, I guess I'm just curious, like looking at our projections, and when we have to hire somebody to do the great job that you've done. And we have schools that, let's say, if the trend continues, if we're still going down into a trough where we're not seeing an increase, let's say for another 5 years, and we see some of these schools have populations that drop close to 200. What do we do? Like, what's going to happen then?
Yeah, that's when if the trend, Chip producing a trend and a slow leveling of the trend. If the trough continued, yeah, then we'd absolutely talk about it. And that's. We don't know yet, because that the difficulty with the elementary trend is we can really only go 5 years out, because we can't anticipate when people decide to have kids.
Yeah, well, we really can only go. In the elementaries, I really only feel comfortable going 3 years out.
Yeah.
Because, 5 years out, the kindergartners, they're not even. Yeah.
Yeah, they're in the womb and so I mean I get your question, Rob. I get your question. Yeah, absolutely. This isn't listen, if we wanted to do the easy thing, we'd have just let 6th grade go the way it was going, and we do what we try to believe is the right thing, which I know you know. But yeah, if we saw that dip, we would definitely address it.
That's what I was just trying to get at. Like, I like everything that you've done here, and I think it makes sense about what's going on at the middle school level. Yeah. And the change and everything, and I liked the analogy that you gave about how we've lost a school already with like 28 sections. I mean, I think a lot of people in the community just hear like my school.
Exactly.
And so they get freaked out. I mean, I would if you said, well, Aiken, I'd be like, what are you talking about?
Exactly.
But, you know, I'm a numbers guy, and so I'm looking at the out-year projections, which I know you have to kind of be careful when you do. But, you know, it seems like you've been so spot on for so many years, and I'm looking at this downward trend, and I don't know, you know, that that graph is going to suddenly turn up again. Like it could be a more expanded trough, right?
Absolutely,
So,
but I mean, you know, since we reopened Smith, you know, we added, you know, 500 students since we opened Smith, and from 4,000 to, we did that by just adding portables. We didn't add any more schools, so I mean, we just added portables wherever, because there wasn't, you know, wasn't a clear spot where you could, well, plus we didn't have a space to build another school. I mean, it just was very difficult. So when we added by sort of, you know, blowing up the balloon, basically, that is the school footprint, and now we're shrinking by reducing the school footprint.
Sure.
And so we're reducing that school footprint, but we're reducing the number of classes, which is obviously the primary driver of costs. But if you wanted to shrink a school, there really isn't any obvious place to combine the schools.
No, I get it. I mean, hopefully we stabilize. It's just, you know, it'll be very interesting to see how things play out in the next 2 or 3 years.
Even in this out year, these out years. I mean, I don't know what would happen in 2030, 2031. I mean, that's, you know, that's not in the projections yet. So
sure,
that could be something. But certainly, in the purview of this forecast, I don't see any consolidation at the elementary school level.
And I wasn't hitting at that. I was just thinking, like, once we get past your yellow highlighted years, as we will in the next 3 years, be curious to see where it goes. That's all.
It really is fascinating because, you know, Dave, I went to that meeting in Webster Hill with the parents, and I was the one telling them we're moving 33 kids, and that wasn't a fun night. And I also stood in a bricked-in garage that holds snow blowers at Aiken because we thought we were going to be one classroom short at Aiken. And Bob Palmer and I stood there looking around going, how do we cut a window in? How can we fit 12 kids into this and make this a classroom? Because we made basements into classrooms. We made locker rooms into classrooms. We made portables into classrooms. And so now to go to the opposite, it's actually much easier, in truth. So
I just have a quick Bristow question. What you're saying makes total sense, but we're hearing it from the board and top level. You said that you talked to the staff and the principal and everything. They see that this can work too? I mean, it makes sense?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie about, I mean, Steve's here and you can ask him personally, and I don't want to speak for anybody. The first time I went, anytime you tell people and they look around a room and they know 2 people that are there now won't be there in the future, and there were a lot of questions, and one of the teachers sent me an email and he said, we have these 12 questions we've talked, can you come back? And that time I brought Andy with me to talk about, okay, here's our plan, here's our placement. And Steve, I think that meeting went very well, and I think the questions from staff certainly diminished after that. I had a couple personal discussions with staff members that are non-tenured at that point about, and I gave them my word, I will send you where the openings are, I will tell you. And of course, if it's you're concerned about this, and it's hard for me to say, don't worry, relax. But every year we do this, we know there's going to be openings that come up because there always are. And we know that we'll have unexpected retirements, and it just depends where and it just depends how. Listen, I'm not going to tell you 100% of the building loves Tom Moore in the decision, but I think they understand it, and I think they understand the desire to keep things at a team level.
I would support that. I think there's an understanding there. I think part of some of the difficulty with change is you have to remember that Bristow teachers have never had any fluctuation. There's always 420 students in the building, and there have been for 13 years. And so when new students move in halfway through the school year, they go to KP or they go to Sedgwick. They don't go to Bristow. When we have fewer sixth graders coming in and we have to cut down a team to a 0.75 team or whatever, that happens at Sedgwick or at KP. So they've never seen that fluctuation that happens routinely with their colleagues at the other middle schools. And I think that's part of the just understanding that as well.
And so then the final level is, how do we communicate this out to parents and families in a way that helps to alleviate some of the concerns raised tonight and that we've seen raised in other forums?
Well, I think tonight was a major, I don't want to, like I said, we would have had this communication previously, but I don't think it's fair for me to send out communication before I've communicated it publicly to the board. So 5th grade parent nights are all coming up for all the incoming people. And that's really who this has an impact on, 5th graders that are coming in next year. And so we'll express that to people then. I know Andy's already volunteered to go and, thank you, Andy, and talk to parents that have questions about it. Our 3 middle school principals always have those nights. And again, this is an extremely limited impact. So it's not something like I'm going to meet with these 33 people and say, this isn't the case. So we make it public tonight. I've already talked to Ronnie about it also, so that people can, I talked to her this afternoon about it, and so that I'm sure she'll put something out there. We'll put more information out there through Steve Cook at Bristow. We want to make sure there's accurate information out there, because I do feel like most of the people I've spoken to, once I have about 5-10 minutes, people understand. May not necessarily agree at the end, but I think they understand. So we'll work on our communication as we work on the lottery numbers. But we couldn't wait completely and just put off everything at Bristow. So that was the case.
I just want to put a plug in for Middle School Info Night, one of the best shows in town. Cheryl and I was last year, and it's at Whiting Lane and Duffy. And you learn a lot. It's always good for us, at least for me, as someone, it's been several years since I went, to remember what it's like to be as a parent, as a student, making that move, especially with your oldest child, maybe your only child. So it's good. And our 3 principals work together as a team, and it's really neat to see. I encourage you, if you have the chance, attend one of these nights. You'll learn a great deal.
Well, I will say that I will be at one of them, but not in this capacity, but as a mommy. And I admit I'm not looking forward to it, because just the idea that my oldest is going into middle school is just getting all of the emotions going. So I will see you there. I cannot promise you that I may not cry.
Well, you should be looking forward to it, because Steve puts on a great show. So, I mean, it's a really, I second what Dave said, that that's no disrespect to the other folks. Everybody does a good role that night, but Steve definitely has a way, so kudos to you. But no, I think you'll have a good time.
I'm going to tell him to do a little less job this year so people don't ask to go there. That would make this all.
Thank you. And Chip, I want to put in a plug to you too. I remember when I first came on the board and we'd go through these projections, and as we would go through the out years, you'd like, don't have to worry about me, I won't be here. Now that time has come, and I'm just going to be sad to see you go, because your expertise is just truly remarkable. I thank you for your service, and you will be missed.
It's so anticlimactic that you stay there for the financial examiners.
Next on the agenda is routine matters, financial report, approval of the financial report for the period ending November 30th, 2018. The recommendation that the Board of Education approve the financial report for the period ending November 30th, 2018. Mark, I believe you're up.
I make a motion that we approve the financial report.
Second.
So this is, unfortunately, I don't know why it seemed that when Jay did this, there was a lot of information and he was excited about it. which is a good thing, right? And I just can't muster all that excitement up because there's not a lot of changes and not a lot of discussion to talk about. So it's relatively minor updates. So, so if we go to the general fund on page 47 of your booklets, again, really no changes here, minor updates. There's a net change of $8,000 that you see on the right-hand side. And it's, again, your total changes for the entire is 23,000. Not a lot of updates or just minor updates. Even like the profession, if you go down to benefits, the professional technical services salaries are, well, not the technical service, but the pupil transportation is minor update, $45,000. And then some of the unemployment, Social Security, lower salaries is the first guess of what's going on there. So again, not a lot going on this first page of 47. And then as we continue to page 48, there's absolutely no changes on this. This is the state and federal grant funds. These go out 2 years, so there's no changes at all on this page from previous. And then if we go to page 49, again, the excitement of no changes from previous. On your special funds report for November 30th. And for the page 50 of your booklet, we made, if you go into November, we made $48,000 there. Meal counts are continuously down. You know, so if we look at our total student lunches, 3,571. We're down, and as Chip used to put it, in our heyday when we were able to fund kitchens at Bristow with this particular fund, they were serving 5,000 meals a day. So we're down quite a bit. But this is an improvement from previous years. So the outlook is good for our nutritional services funds too. I miss anything, Chip? Any questions?
Just ask, I always confuse parentheses and non-parentheses, so maybe it's just me, but I understand that our food sales are down, but our fund balance is higher. So what are we doing right?
So a couple things. One, our lunch sales are basically down with our enrollment. Our enrollment's down 0.9%. Our average lunch count is down 1.2%. So roughly in the same there. The feds and the state changed things in April of last year. So we have about four percentage points more free and reduced lunch students. So our lunch sales are down by 8%, but our federal and state aid is up by 10.6%. So, well, because we've moved people from the paid and reduced category to the reduced and then the free category. That's a result of the state recategorizing things. So we get $3 a meal for free lunch and 28 cents for 31 cents, sorry, for a paid lunch. So we're getting substantial amounts of money there. Secondly, you know, with Tim Brzezinski in charge, we've been very careful about our food and cafeteria supplies. He's been going after Department of Defense surplus materials, surplus supplies that provide a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables. There's a program that we're able to access that, and that's reduced our food costs substantially. So,
bravo.
And then he's just watching every nickel. We're watching every nickel and dime.
Mm-hmm. I think it's great. I'm just saying this is the first month I can remember since I've been on the board where there wasn't some catastrophe looming, you know, very soon. So bravo.
Yes, and so we are. I think we have turned the corner on the nutrition services program. Whereas I don't know, 3 years ago it was like, well, we were thinking you guys would have to contribute, pony up $200,000 or $300,000 a year. So, but I think we stabilized that.
Any other questions? Call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Vote carries. We are winding down to the approval of the minutes. Approval of the minutes from the December 4th, 2018 regular Board of Education meeting. It's recommended that the Board of Education approve the minutes from the regular Board of Education meeting of December 4th, 2018. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions in terms of any necessary corrections? I did not see any. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay. Information and reports. Do we have communication reports, reports from other boards and organizations? Anybody has anything? All right, other information and discussion. Non-staff communication, okay, we did that. Future business, announcement of future meeting dates. Tuesday, February 5th, 2019 is our regular Board of Education meeting, and that would be the adoption of the CIP at 7 p.m. here at Town Hall, 50 South Main Street, and here in the Legislative Chamber, room 314. And the second meeting for February will be held on Wednesday, not Tuesday. This is for the listening audience at home. It would be Wednesday, February 20th, will be our regular Board of Education meeting at 7 p.m. here at Town Hall, here in the Legislative Chamber, room 314. Is there a request for any future agenda items at this time? Deb?
Yes. So I would like to make a request that we move the public hearing and budget workshop currently scheduled for March 27th to March 21st. And I don't know if I need to, I'll ask, can I make a motion that we do that? I'll make a motion that we do that. How's that?
If you need a motion, I'll second it.
A second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion or questions? No?
I think Deb owes us a.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for that opportunity. I am unavoidably out of town on the 27th, and I really don't want to miss the public hearing and budget workshop, so it would be very much appreciated, the flexibility of my colleagues around this table and the administration to move this meeting to March 21st. I recognize that gives us 2 meetings in the same week, but it does free up the last week of the month. And I wanted to make this request early enough so that anyone who's planning to come to speak at the public hearing and or come to the budget workshop and listen to our questions and the responses has time to plan that out for March.
We're meeting the 19th that week as scheduled, is that correct?
Yes.
As a regular Board of Ed meeting?
The only thing I'll say, and I'm not saying no, this is your meeting. I do have a conflict that I can probably move or travel back and forth. The only thing, and again, this is not a no at all. This is your meetings, your dates. Historically, the reason it's been the 27th is because that's in the week before the adoption, but just as historical background, not as anything else, so that's not. So we'll give a week in between, so if there are letters of communications, you could still address it the night of the vote, certainly, so not just.
Can you remind me, is this a workshop that's on televised and available on YouTube?
Yeah, it's the it's absolutely televised. It's the one that typically in a quiet year nobody comes to, and we're done by 7:20. I mean, in all honesty, it's the one that years ago was even canceled because there wasn't a interest historically. It's not. It tends to be public comment.
Now.
It's public comment, and then it's a workshop. But we've already presented all of the answers to all of the questions previously. So, the one where Andy comes up and Chip and Gretchen, and we go through all of that. It's not that meeting. It's the following one where there's public comment is available, and then we're there to answer any questions.
right? And those questions easily, Deb, I think any member of the board, we would have the first meeting that Tom mentioned, you review and prepare any questions that you could submit at that time, maybe a viable option for you to submit written questions, and then view the meeting online and follow up with any questions. You have plenty of time.
Yeah, you know, as the elder statesman here, has been on the board as long, we've all missed meetings, and people have phoned in, called in, watched online live and things. And if we set a precedent of, you know, changing meetings for each individual schedule, this can get unruly if we, you know, continuously do it. And, you know, so I would be on the mindset of, you know, and I've missed meetings in the past as well, that we have a scheduled meeting, we follow that schedule, and if people can't make it, we understand that. I mean, I think, I don't know if anyone's missed a meeting here, but I don't want to set a precedent that if we can't make a meeting.
I missed one last year.
Yeah, that every time someone is going to miss a meeting for their schedule, that we change it. So I'd just like to keep it as that and mention that as well.
Cheryl, do you have a question, or you want to
Well, I'm not sure are we debating whether or not whether it's worth doing, or do we vote? Like what, I'm not sure.
So the motion on the table right now is to move the meeting.
Oh, so we would actually vote?
Yes.
Okay.
It's been, a motion has been made and been seconded, and so now we had discussion and a question, and so now we would call the vote.
Okay, then I do have a question. I didn't understand. Or I don't have a question, I have a comment. I totally agree that we can't simply move meetings when people are not here, but I will say that a workshop does feel more substantial, and if we can't all do it, then that's that. But if we could all do it, I don't actually see any reason why not to do it 2 months in advance. It's not like it's a magic date. So unless there's I see no reason not to do it if everybody can accommodate, because we have plenty of time.
I guess to Dave's point and Tom's, this meeting is the least timely meeting, and it's a matter of just follow-up questions. And as we said, we were out of here by 7:30, so it's the precedent of being a workshop, and unavoidably, that's not necessarily the case. It's one of our ones that we actually get out early, and not a lot of discussion has taken place. So I just put that on the record.
Yeah, and as the questions come up, because there is a chance I can't get out of the meeting, I'm committed to a committee that's meeting. I'm not sure, my staff would be able to answer the questions that you have. They're the ones that typically answer on that night anyway, and I would follow along online. But yes, it tends to be a relatively short and public comment. There's been other opportunities for public comment, so unless there's one big issue, it doesn't tend to be a big public comment night, because they tend to come for public comment before either the vote or during the lead up to the vote or the run out of the budget rather than that night. So
I just want to say one other thing, like kind of piggybacking on Tom and Dave's point, like my schedule looks okay right now for the change, but it's a heavy burden personally to say like two nights in a week when my business and personal schedule are already very full. So that's why I do kind of like only having one obligation a week or twice a month. So to piggyback it to 2 in 1 week, that could become problematic for me just by the nature of my life as it gets closer. So yes, right now this looks like no big deal to me, but based on how chaotic my work and professional life and home life are, it could create a hardship for me to the point where maybe I'm the one that's watching online because I wouldn't be able to come. So I'm kind of with you on the precedence thing, and maybe just leaving it the way it is.
I'm going to withdraw the motion at this time, regrettably. I obviously don't want to inconvenience anyone. I don't want to miss a public hearing at all. I definitely don't want to miss a budget workshop either, but I don't want to inconvenience the board and the administration, so regrettably I will not be here.
Okay, So we just move to the next agenda item, right? Okay. Are there any visitors left that wish to comment? All right, I don't see anyone making a beeline for the podium, so we will move to no executive session. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, and have a great evening.